Many people seem to think that death doom metal as a genre originated from either Paradise Lost, taking down death metal and really slowing it down, or Winter doing that really apocalyptic death metal version of the Celtic Frost sound. And I guess that's justified. Those two bands really got the sub-genre kicking. Like, they really gave death doom metal a start and provided a template for following bands to expand and transcend, or in some cases merely imitate. That doesn't mean that they weren't some really early pioneers going for a similar approach, some earlier bands, and those can't really be considered more influential just because they did that stuff earlier, like some historical revisionists would have you believe. But looking back from the mid 2010s, or well, we're in the 2020s now. I guess I'm kind of lagging behind. To the late 1980s, they can give you a good insight into how young musicians approached the idea of coalescing death and doom metal influences into a new style of music. They were the Americans Dream Death from Pittsburgh, who basically took the Celtic Frost sound and injected a little more of a death thrash type of aggression into the heavy parts while slowing down and expanding on the slow parts. Sempiternal Deathreign from the Netherlands, they are most likely the closest to proper death doom metal the 1980s ever came. They might actually have had their share of influence on later bands, as like a whole slew of Dutch death doom bands would follow in similar footsteps. It's possible that even famous bands like Asphyx might have been familiar with them and drawn ideas from them. Outside of the Netherlands, I don't know if there were all too many people familiar with them before the rise of the internet made them all the more accessible. Probably not. Like, Sempiternal Deathreign, completely lacking any advanced knowledge of what death doom metal was supposed to sound like by 1990s standards due to their limited psychic abilities. They crafted a sound that was unlike anything else at the time, and it's really a match to this day. Not content with simply slowing down parts of the death thrash that was so prevalent in the underground in the 1980s, they are one of the few examples of bands to play like literal death doom, as in literally taking influences from both death metal in its 80s form and traditional doom metal, rather than just the former, and with an emphasis on the slow parts. Like, the traditional doom influences on this album have such a strong 1970s sound, like really Black Sabbath-like. They couldn't be further from slow death metal. Like, it's really Black Sabbath, but the note progressions, the melodies, the atmospheric doomy parts, like everything with guitar solos, like like the opening riff to the third track, Devastating Empire Towards Humanity, after that piano intro, they remind me of Flower Traveling band from Japan, which was a band from Japan who was basically a Black Sabbath clone, but with a really psychedelic Japanese interpretation. I don't know if this is like a direct influence, like if Sempiternal Deathreign actually ever heard Flower Traveling band, or if the Dutch and the Japanese simply interpret Black Sabbath in a similar way. Like with the Dutch, you never know. I don't know, but it's the closest comparison I can make. Some of the more meaty doom parts in which the rhythm guitar dominates also have a pentagram feel to them, and there are like some bits and pieces that wouldn't look out of place on a Witchfinder General album. So it's really traditional doom kind of stuff when they play doom. But it doesn't matter what their direct influences were, like, they definitely succeed at giving this album a unique hazy feel, like something you would hear in a morbid hippie commune intent of murdering Hollywood stars, had the hippie movement extended its reach into the 1980s. What really drives this image home is the sheer viciousness and malevolence of the equally important death thresh type of parts. Like sort of a cross between early Slayer and Possessed. After one too many cups of coffee, they like really rampage through your speakers like the Tasmanian devil on the worst choleric fit of his life. The band is not as tight as aforementioned American Professionals, but not sloppy in any way either, like further enhances this feeling, as if the whole band is literally releasing all the pent-up rage of a lifetime. And what really helps drive this point home is that the vocalist sounds completely off the hinge in a way that was far ahead of its time and probably is without match to this day. Can sort of compare it to like the Pestilence Asphyx singer Martin van Drunen, or whoever does the high-pitched vocals for Macabre, but much more honest and far less gimmicky than either. Like really, really from the soul, from the lungs, from the heart, from that. And I can't help shape the mental image of the crazy long-haired guy from Police Academy, like second Police Academy movie and recurring character after that, Zed, I think. He literally sounds like he has all screws loose in his head and a few extra in his pocket. Like this, the way this is laid over the frantic blasting of the drums and the often nearly crank call like buzzsawing of the guitars, just makes it really deliciously barbaric. Wouldn't really matter much how great the doomy parts and the fast parts are individually if they were like put together poorly. But that's why I praised this album so highly, because the songwriting, the crafting of a uniform whole from the disparate parts is impeccable and nothing short of amazing. There's never one transition which doesn't exhibit a coherent flow. Parts go from one to another seamlessly and show an effortless talent for musical storytelling, taking the listener on an emotional journey from low to high and back again, without any of the shifts in mood ever feeling abrupt or out of place. The forgivable horror camp of the lyrics aside, I feel myself transported into the world of prehistoric barbarians with scenes of battle and scenes of pre-religious spiritual experiences showing different sides of their lives. In essence, this is a perfect album to lean back and enjoy the experience, but it does not end there, as it is just as perfect for many other purposes you would want a metal album for, such as having a few beers with friends or living out some pent-up emotions or simply appreciate just how amazing this form of art can be. It's one of the most complete metal albums I know in this regard, as there's not a time or situation in which I would find it inappropriate to play. Absolute classic in metal history. In the history of death doom metal in particular, and definitely an essential purchase should you find a decently priced copy. If not, be glad that we live in a time in which every classic is being reissued, and this album, it's probably out there in some reissued version already. I don't know, I haven't checked, but if it isn't, it will be, definitely.